Beryl is a middle-aged swordsman who runs a dojo in the middle of nowhere and lives a peaceful life. One day while he is training, his father turns to him and says he really wishes he had some grandkids to look after. It's been years since Beryl took over as the instructor here, but he still is maidenless as he was before. Beryl says he's been too busy with the family dojo to think about having kids, but his dad still wants him to at least try. He even suggests that Beryl should try raising up one of his female students so he can get married, but for ethical reasons he refuses. This dojo has been in Beryl's family for generations, and he has been diligently working as the instructor here ever since he took over from his father. Once he dreamed of achieving great things, like becoming a famous swordmaster. But while he is definitely a better swordsman than the average person, he doesn't think his skills are worthy of the swordmaster title. With that said, he thinks of himself as a good teacher, since many of his students have gone on to become successful swordsmen after graduating. Once practice is over for the day, Beryl goes home to have dinner with his parents. But his dad is still insisting that he get married already. Beryl's dad tries to get his wife friend to pressure Beryl into finding a wife, but she says these things take time, so there's no need to rush him. However, she is still expecting Beryl to give her a grandbaby. Beryl chokes on his food a little because that's a lot easier said than done, especially since he doesn't even have a girlfriend yet. And it's not like a pretty girl is just going to show up at his door. A few seconds later, there's a knock at the door, and Beryl opens it to find a pretty girl standing there. She greets him as her master, and after taking a closer look at her, Beryl realizes that she's one of his former students, Alucia Citrus. Beryl invites her inside and offers her a cup of tea so they can catch up. Beryl remembers Alucia being a gifted student back when he trained her, but he never could have expected that she would become the commander of the Royal Knight Order. Anyway, Beryl asks her why she came to visit, so Alucia explains that part of her duty as Knight Commander is to train new recruits, so she took it upon herself to recommend Beryl as a special sword instructor. She even got approved as an Imperial Order, so she came to inform Beryl of the good news. Beryl never asked to become an Imperial instructor, so he considers declining the offer, but his dad tells him that people can get executed for disobeying an Imperial Order, so he can't just ignore it. Alucia assures Beryl that he won't be killed if he refuses the offer, but he would probably face severe consequences for it, so he had better just go along with it. She already has a carriage waiting to take them to the capital, so they can leave now, and tomorrow she'll give him the details of his new job. Beryl can't believe Alucia expects him to leave right now, but his dad is already on board with the idea, so he wishes Beryl good luck and tells him to find a wife for himself while he's in the capital. In fact, he says Alucia would make a great wife for Beryl, but Beryl tells him to stop saying stuff like that because it's making Alucia uncomfortable. There's way too much of an age gap for him and Alucia to become a couple, but Alucia mumbles under her breath that she wouldn't mind. Anyway, Beryl doesn't want to find out what the severe consequences are, so he agrees to the offer and accompanies Alucia to the capital. While the two of them are sitting in the carriage, Beryl notices that Alucia is still using the sword he gifted to her. This is a sword Beryl gives to all the students that graduate from his dojo, and Alucia has taken special care of hers ever since she got it. Beryl is glad to see that she values his gift so much, but he doesn't think that sword is good enough for a knight commander like herself to use. He says she could find something better at any other blacksmith. But Alucia says this sword is the perfect one for her. Beryl assumes she must be so attached to that sword because as her former master, she still believes that anything she gets from Beryl is superior, but he is just an ordinary swordsman, so he'd never be able to cut it as a special instructor. Just then, Alucia speaks up and says she is so excited that the hillbilly swordmaster is finally coming to the capital. Beryl has no idea who she's talking about because he's not a hillbilly and he's definitely not a swordmaster, but she tells him that he is well known in the world of swordsmanship. He has trained dozens of students who went on to become legendary swordsmen and adventurers, so he's a bit of a living legend, although Alucia isn't happy with the nickname he got. Beryl finds the story interesting, but he's convinced that Alucia is the only one who thinks of him as a swordmaster. Soon they arrive at the royal capital, so Alucia drops Beryl off at an inn so he can rest, and she says she'll come pick him up tomorrow morning. The next day, Alucia takes Beryl to the castle and introduces him to the Knight's Order. She informs all the recruits that Beryl is so strong that even she would be no match for him, so they should feel honored to have such a skilled man as their teacher. However, a couple of the knights don't think Beryl deserves to be in such a high position, and one of them is particularly unhappy about this. A little while later, Beryl is talking with Alucia in the halls, and she's congratulating him for officially becoming a special instructor. She tells him only needs to come in to train the recruits 3 or 4 times a month, so it shouldn't interfere too much with his usual lessons at the dojo. Just then, a girl comes running up to Beryl, and she's so excited to see her master again that she can hardly contain herself. Her name is Karuni, and she was a student at Beryl's dojo 2 years ago. He recalls that her dream was to join the Knight's Order, so he's glad to see that she actually made it happen. Although Kuruni is still only a trainee, so she's still got a lot of work to do before she can become a proper knight. With that said, she is happy that she'll get to train under Beryl again, and the same goes for Lucia. Later that day, Beryl returns to his home, but as he opens the door, he finds that yet another one of his students has come to pay him a visit. His name is Randrid, and he came to introduce Beryl to his wife and newborn child. Beryl is happy to see that Randrid is doing well, but his father cuts him off and says Beryl shouldn't bother coming home until he has a wife and kid like Randrid over here. Speaking of Randrid, after graduating from Beryl's dojo, he went on to become a platinum rank adventurer, but now that he has a child, he wants to retire and move back into the village. Platinum rank is pretty hard to achieve, so Beryl is surprised that Randrid is willing to give it up so easily. But that again, being an adventurer is dangerous works, so he probably doesn't want to risk it while he has a child to take care of. While he's here, Randrid promises to do his best to run the dojo, but Beryl has no idea what he's talking about. Beryl's father tells him that since Randrid is decently skilled, he can take over as the dojo's instructor, and that means Beryl won't have to stay here anymore. So his father is kicking him out, even though Beryl owns this house. The next day, Beryl explains the whole situation to Lucia and explains that he needs to find a house here in the city. The inn he slept at yesterday was a little too luxurious for him to stay there permanently, so he wants to find a place that's more affordable, and Lucia is more than happy to help him look. She asks him if he'd like to come and live at her house, but Beryl doesn't think that would be appropriate, so much to Lucia's disappointment, he turns her down. Lucia then asks him if he would like to get some food with her since it's lunchtime, and Beryl is fine with that, so they start heading for a restaurant. However, while they are walking, someone calls Lucia Shingles for walking around town with a man and calling him master without a second thought. The girl and Lucia seem to have an unpleasant history together, and the girl thinks it is outrageous that a proud knight commander would be running around with a random man. Beryl has been trying to hide his face so he can avoid conflict, but the girl wants to see his face, so she pulls the map down, and as soon as she recognizes Beryl, she calls him master too. Beryl is confused by this because he has no idea who she is, so she reminds him that her name is Serena, and he once saved her and taught her how to use a sword. It takes a while for Beryl to remember, but he eventually recalls finding an injured girl 20 years ago. He took her and nursed her back to health and eventually taught her how to fight, but he hadn't seen her in over a decade, so he's pleasantly surprised to see that she's a black rank adventurer. Serena apologizes for not visiting Beryl all these years, but she's also curious as to why he is suddenly in the royal capital. Lucia explains that Beryl has been appointed as a special instructor for the Knight's Order, so he is moving to the capital, and she is here to help him find a suitable inn. However, Serena says she'd be much better at finding accommodations because as an adventurer, she was used to staying in inns. Serena and Lucia start arguing over who gets to go house hunting with Beryl, and Beryl has no idea why the two hate each other so much, but with their help, he eventually manages to find an inn that suits him. He thanks both of them for their help, but he asks them to please stop arguing with each other for his sake, because he can't listen to any more yelling. Out of respect for Beryl, the two of them stop arguing with one another and quietly walk home. Beryl watches them from a window, and while he can't say he will enjoy all the excitement of city life, he thinks it's nice that he will have so many of his students around to take care of him. The next day, the Knight's Order is training as usual, and the vice commander, Henbritz, is absolutely dominating all the others with his skill. After defeating his aspiring partner, Lucia suddenly makes an announcement and informs everyone that there has been a change to the schedule. Instead of once a week, Beryl will be instructing them starting today, so she expects them to work harder than ever before. Beryl tells them all that he's happy to be here, but before he can begin his first lesson, Henbritz approaches and says he has something to say. To be a special instructor for the Knight's Order, Beryl would need to possess a certain level of strength, so he is challenging him to a duel. Henbritz isn't trying to be disrespectful. He simply wants to make sure that Beryl is good enough for the position, and as the vice commander, he is within his rights to ask for a duel, so Lucia sanctions it. Beryl really wishes she would stop agreeing to things on his behalf. But since Henbritz challenged him, he has no choice but to get ready for the duel. Henbritz is sure that Lucia only thinks highly of Beryl because he was her instructor when she was a kid. But that doesn't mean Beryl is cut out to be a special instructor for the Knight Order, so Henbritz is going to prove that by defeating Beryl right now. Beryl agrees with Henbritz because he doesn't think he's good enough for this job, but it would look bad for Lucia if the man she recommended lost easily, so he decides to do his best against Henbritz. The duel commences and Henbritz charges in to attack Beryl. Beryl begins parrying the attacks, and he is amazed by the sheer power and speed that Henbritz possesses. But he knows that if he can deflect one of the strikes just right, then it will leave Henbritz wide open and he can close in for a strike. That's exactly what he does, and Henbritz is left speechless because in a real battle he definitely would have died just now. That counts as a point for Beryl, so the two of them return to their starting positions and Henbritz begins attacking again. Beryl still can't believe how strong Henbritz is, but all his moves are predictable, so it was pretty easy for him to parry. Henbritz realizes he won't hit Beryl if he doesn't go all out, so he uses his signature move to attack. The Roaring Blade technique has so much power behind it that it can't be blocked or parried, so there should be no way for Beryl to win here. However, after Henbritz swings his sword, Beryl disappears and reappears behind him with his sword next to Henbritz's neck. With this, Beryl has officially won the duel, and Henbritz isn't even mad about it. He is just amazed by the skill Beryl just displayed, and he apologizes for being so rude earlier. Later on, Henbritz holds a party to welcome Beryl as the new instructor, but he still really wants to know how Beryl managed to counter his signature spin move. Beryl explains that all he did was move along with Henbritz's rotation, which is how he ended up behind him, but doing it is a lot harder than Beryl makes it sound. In any case, Henbritz is looking forward to training under Beryl, and so are the others. The story continues. A week has passed since Beryl became an instructor here, and while two of the knights are practicing together, he comes over to give them some advice. He's been watching how they fight and their sword play is decent, but he thinks they need to work on their distance. He demonstrates that if you focus too much on watching your opponent's sword, then your opponent can get closer without you noticing. It may not seem like much, but in a real sword fight, half a step of distance can be the difference between winning and losing. Beryl thought he was just giving basic advice to his students, but with how everyone is looking at him, you would think he just spit the greatest bars of all time. Ever since Beryl's duel with Henblitz, the knights have treated every word Beryl says as gospel, and he has to admit that it has made his job a lot easier. Once practice is over for the day, Beryl sits down to relax, and Henblitz hands him a towel to wipe his sweat with. A few minutes later, Kuruni approaches Beryl and asks him if he has any plans after this. Beryl wasn't really planning to do anything, so Kuruni asks him if he would like her to show him around town. Now that Beryl thinks about it, he hasn't had a chance to see much of Baltrain yet, so he takes Kuruni up on the offer, and she excitedly runs off to go change her clothes. Meanwhile, Alucia is busy meeting with the royal officials to give them a report on the state of the Knight's Order, especially with the new special instructor who was hired recently. Alucia assures them that Beryl has exceeded all expectations, and since there is nothing more to discuss, the meeting comes to a close. People had warned her that if she wanted to continue developing her swordsmanship, she should avoid becoming knight captain because of all the bureaucracy. The only reason she took this job was because she needed a position of power to bring Beryl to the capital. Back when Alucia was still a kid, her parents brought her to Beryl's dojo so she could learn how to defend herself, and from the moment she met Beryl, she knew he was a kind person. After she joined the dojo, Beryl had her practice her sword swings and jump across tree stumps to train her mobility. He also had her do some basic strength training, and while his methods may have been a little unorthodox before long, Alucia felt very comfortable using a sword. One day, Beryl asked Alucia if she would like to have a mock battle with him, and she excitedly agreed because she wanted to show off everything she learned. However, when she actually went up against Beryl, she couldn't find any openings in his stance. Since Alucia grew up learning from Beryl, she thought all sword instructors were as good as he was. But one day, when Beryl took them out to participate in a mock battle against another dojo, she realized she was wrong. The person she was up against was full openings and had the patience of a toddler because he blindly attacked Alucia without a plan. As expected, Alucia mopped the floor with him, and it was barely even a challenge for her. Once the mock battle is over, Beryl and his students start walking back to their dojo, and Beryl is glad that his students got a chance to face people who had different fighting styles. Speaking of which, Alucia asked Beryl if his dojo happens to be better than average compared to the others, but he doesn't like to think of it that way. Sure, they may have won the mock battle today, but it's more important to focus on what you learned from the experience rather than whether you win or lose. Alucia understands the point Beryl is trying to make, but then she notices that her hairpin is missing. She realizes she must have dropped it back at the dojo, and it's really important to her, so she tells Beryl that she's going back to get it. Alucia eventually arrives back at the other dojo, so she starts looking for the hairpin she dropped, but unfortunately it looks like the guy she defeated found it before she did. For a second, it looked like he was going to be nice and hand over without causing trouble, but that would make too much sense. Instead, he throws the hairpin into the dojo and says Alucia is going to have to take all of them at once if she wants to get her pin back. She may have beaten him in the mock battle, but there's no way he can lose when he has all his friends backing him up. Considering how trash their sword skills were earlier, Alucia might have a good chance of beating them all on her own. But she knows Beryl wouldn't want her to use her skills to beat other people up, so she just stood and was totally ready to get clobbered. However, before the jerk could smack her face, Beryl steps in front of Alucia and takes the hit instead. The strike did no damage to him, but it still hurt a little, so he asks the boys if this is really how they want to use their swordsmanship. The jerk still doesn't understand that what he is doing is messed up, so he tries to strike Beryl on the head this time. However, Beryl easily ducks down and disarms the jerk in one swift motion. He then goes on to parry a bunch of the jerk's friends, but before things get any worse, the master of this dojo shows up. He heard a commotion and ran over as soon as he could, but he's very disappointed to see his students behaving in such an uncivilized manner. He kneels down to sincerely apologize to Beryl and promises to make sure this never happens again. Beryl and Alucia begin walking home together, and Beryl explains that he got a bad feeling when Alucia went to get her hairpin, so he followed her to make sure she was alright. Alucia feels bad because Beryl got hit because of her, but he tells her the hit wasn't that bad. And besides, she didn't do anything wrong, so she doesn't need to blame herself for what happened. If anything, he thinks this was his fault because as Alucia's teacher, he shouldn't have let her go alone into a potentially dangerous situation. Years go by and Alucia is in the middle of another mock battle with Beryl. Beryl's form is still as solid as ever, but this time, as he swings his sword, Alucia is able to keep up with him and score a point against Beryl for once. Beryl is surprised by how much Alucia had improved, but he believes she is finally ready to graduate from his dojo, so he presents her with her ceremonial graduation sword. By now, Alucia had come to realize that Beryl was ignorant of how godly his sword skills are, and she really didn't want to leave his dojo because there was still so much she could learn from him. But at the same time, she didn't want to cause trouble for Beryl, so she didn't argue with him over it. Instead, she set out to prove that Beryl's techniques are superior to all others, so she enrolled in the Knight's Order program and took the entrance test. And just as she expected during the test, none of her fellow candidates were a match for the training Beryl gave her. Even the examiners couldn't keep up with her, so they would never stand a chance against Beryl. He possesses near-inhuman reaction time and observational skills that far exceed any normal person. So there's no doubt in Alucia's mind that Beryl is the greatest swordsman in the world. However, Beryl isn't aware of his skill, and knowing him, he would happily live out the rest of his days as an unknown swordmaster. But Alucia refused to let her master remain unrecognized. With her skills, she slowly rose through the ranks of the Knight's Order in hopes of gaining the power to support Beryl, and by the time she finally acquired the position of Knight Commander, it had been 10 years since she left Beryl's dojo. And in that time, Beryl became even more amazing than she remembered him to be. She feels a little guilty about appointing him as an instructor without asking first, but it was the only way she could get him to leave the village and gain some recognition. She returns to the training hall and meets with Henblitz to ask how training with Beryl went. Henblitz tells her that it was amazing, and that they all learned so much for him today. Alucia doesn't see Beryl around, so she asks if he already went home for the day, but Henblitz tells her he actually left with Karuni because she said she wanted to show him around town. Alucia gets a little jealous after hearing that because it means Karuni basically asked Beryl out on a date and she wishes she had thought of it first. Meanwhile, on Beryl and Karuni's date, she's showing him all the wonderful shops they have in town, and Beryl is amazed by how lively this place is compared to his village. Although he wonders why Karuni brought him to the Western District, since all the tourist attractions like the Church Palace are meant to be in the Northern District. Karuni says he is right, but once you've lived in the city for long enough, you see the palace and church all the time, so it gets kind of boring after a while. But Beryl was actually looking forward to seeing it though. While they are still walking through the market, Beryl hears someone call out to him, so he turns and finds this girl walking towards him. She is calling him master, so she must have been one of his students, but he has no idea who she is. She also seems to be good friends with Karuni, but he still can't remember who she is. The girl is disappointed that her master has forgotten about her, so she points to her sword to remind him that she was one of his graduates. Beryl thinks about it for a few more seconds, and he finally remembers where he has seen the girl before. Her name is Ficelle, and she was indeed one of his students. She spent 2 years training alongside Karuni, although she looked a lot different back then. It has been 5 years since Beryl saw her, so she was bound to grown up a lot since then. And she's been doing pretty well for herself in the capital, because she is now the ace of the Magic Corps. Beryl is happy to hear that she is doing well, but he's a bit surprised that she joined the Magic Corps because he doesn't remember teaching her anything about magic. Karuni asks Feis if she's here to do some shopping, so she explains that she came to buy some magic accessories. Beryl has never heard of magic accessories before, so Feis picks one up and explains that it allows anyone to use magic. Although she is capable of using magic without any accessories, Beryl is surprised that Feis can really use magic on her own. Then again, She did say she is part of the magic corps, so it makes sense. Just then, Beryl hears a woman scream because her purse just got snatched. As soon as he sees this, Beryl gets ready to chase the guy down, but before he does anything, Feist tells him he can let her handle this. She then draws her sword and covers it in magic before slashing in the direction of the thief. Her slash releases a burst of magic energy which ties the thief's legs up, and once he hits the ground, Kuruni apprehends him. Beryl is impressed by how well the two of them handled the situation, especially Ficel's magic, because he has never seen anything like it before. Ficel explains that she basically covers the sword in magic whenever she fights, and Beryl's training is really useful when it comes to adapting the magic for combat, so she is thankful. And Beryl is equally thankful that Ficel is still using all the techniques he taught her. The next morning, Beryl wakes up early to go for a stroll through the city, but while he is walking, he hears someone calling his name. He turns around and finds a little girl standing there, so he asks her if she's lost. The girl yells at him for treating her like a child because she is the head of the magic corps. But Beryl thinks the girl is just playing a game, so he doesn't believe her. The girl is starting to get frustrated by the fact that Beryl doesn't believe her, so she demonstrates her power by spawning a huge fireball from her finger. Beryl finally believes that she is part of the magic corps, but he is surprised that such a little girl could use magic like that. She tells him to stop calling her a little girl. Her name is Lucy, and she's a full-grown adult. Okay, maybe grown is a bit of a stretch, but she's a lot older than Beryl is, so she will not stand for him treating her as a child. Feist told her all about Beryl and how amazing he is, so she wanted to meet him in person. She is sure that Beryl must be an excellent teacher because Ficel's skill with a sword is exceptional. But Beryl says Ficel's success is due to her own hard work, all he did was teach her the basics. Beryl has been walking with Lucy to be polite, but she eventually leads him into a wide open area and any gamer can tell where this is going. Lucy is very fond of her magic, so she trains every day to improve as much as possible. However, she doesn't have anyone worthy to practice with, but since Beryl is a legendary swordmaster, she thinks he will be a good challenge for her. Before Beryl can even respond, she tries to hit him with a blast of fire, but he jumps back to dodge it in time. Beryl would have preferred to avoid fighting altogether, but with the way Lucy is staring at him, it doesn't look like she will let him go until he gives her a proper fight, so he draws his sword and gets ready to face her. The story continues. We see Lucy launches a massive fireball at Beryl, so he jumps out of the way and starts darting around to evade her attack. Lucy continues throwing fireballs at him, but Beryl is able to dodge and parry everything she shoots at him. So she decides to switch things up and uses ice magic to create 3 ice balls. She throws the ice balls at Beryl, and despite their size, he is easily able to cut the ice in half with one swing of his sword. After seeing what Beryl can do, Lucy is even more invested in this fight, but Beryl wants to end things as soon as possible, so begins charging towards her. He doesn't want to actually hurt her, so he intends to just use the hilt of his sword to knock her out. But just when he gets within striking distance, Lucy covers herself in flame to force Beryl to back away. He had her worried for a second there, because she knows she would get knocked out instantly if she let Beryl get too close. Beryl is really starting to wish he could use magic too, because it's really hard to fight against it with a sword, but Lucy is just getting started. She summons even more fireballs behind Beryl, so he's forced to start running again. Lucy finds him using how Beryl is just running around without a plan, but this is his first time facing a wizard, so he doesn't exactly have a book of strategies for this. The fireballs eventually stop raining down, but just when Beryl thinks he is safe, Lucy drops a massive ice ball on top of him. He spots it in time and parries it back at Lucy, but she is easily able to destroy it with her fire magic. As a result, there is now a layer of mist obstructing her view, so Beryl tries to take advantage of this opening to attack. But Lucy isn't out of tricks yet, and uses lightning magic to knock him back. Beryl hasn't managed to land a solid attack on Lucy yet, but she hasn't landed a hit on Beryl either, and she's starting to get frustrated by it. She was hoping to end this with basic spells, but since Beryl has held out for so long, she decides to use her trump card. Beryl notices her pause for a moment, so he thinks this might be his chance to attack, but a second later he freezes in his tracks because Lucy just summoned a black hole. He isn't exactly sure what that thing is supposed to do, but he can tell that it'll be bad if he rushes in, so he patiently waits for Lucy to make a move. However, she suddenly gives up and dispels her magic. There's no point in continuing the fight if Beryl can maintain his composure like that in the face of a black hole, so she apologizes for taking things too far and says they can end things here for today. Beryl is just relieved that he doesn't have to fight her anymore because it's really nerve-wracking to go up against someone like Lucy. But out of curiosity, he wants to know what would have happened if she decided to launch her spell, and Lucy explains that in theory, the spell should have shredded Beryl's body of pieces. Granted, she can see why Ficelle looks up to Beryl so much because most people who saw that spell would have passed out from fear immediately, and this is the first time she had come across a swordsman like Beryl who could put up such a good fight. That said, she really is sorry for randomly forcing him into a duel, so she tells him to come to the Magic Institution later, and she'll personally make up for all the trouble she caused. Late that day, Beryl heads to the training hall as usual to instruct the students, and while he is on his break, he happens to run to Ficelle in the hallway. She is here to deliver magic healing potions on behalf of the Magic Institute, and she tells Beryl he can have one for himself. He tries to turn her down since healing potions are really expensive, but Feist tells him this one is free as her way of apologizing for what happened with Lucy this morning. Beryl was still half convinced that Lucy was really just a little girl, but Feist explains that Lucy uses magic to keep herself looking young, so no one actually knows how old she is. Even so, Beryl is surprised that Lucy could fit so much power into such a tiny body because he was really worried that he might die when she was attacking him. He never wants to fight another wizard again after what happened, but Feist tells him that Lucy is a special case. Normal wizards can't cast magic continuously like she can, so he would probably be able to beat most wizards in a fight. Just then, Alucia shows up and she tells Beryl that he has just received a special request. He is curious about it, so Alucia leads him to a room where they both meet with Serena. She tells them that the Adventurers Guild would like to hire Beryl to organize some special training for the new adventurers in preparation for their first ascent into a dungeon. Hearing about the new adventurers makes Beryl think back to his younger days when he wanted to be an adventurer. Items found in a dungeon can be pretty valuable, so Beryl was eager to conquer one, but then he got beaten up by monsters on his first day, so he ran home and never attempted adventuring again. He tells the two that he thinks adventuring is a dangerous business. That's exactly why they want him to train the new adventurers. They've already made all the necessary preparations, and it won't interfere with his job as a special instructor here, so there's nothing stopping him. But at the end of the day, Beryl still needs to agree to do the job, so Serena invites him to come to the Adventurers Guild and meet with the Guildmaster to talk about the job. The Adventurers Guild is nearby, so Serena takes Beryl there immediately, and once they arrive, they enter the Guildmaster's office. However, to Beryl's surprise, he finds Lucy sitting on the couch waiting for him. She heard about the job the Adventurers Guild offered him, and since she is good friends with the Guildmaster, she rushed over so she could meet Beryl again. The Guildmaster, Nidus, then introduces himself, and with everything he has heard about Beryl from both Serena and Lucy, he has no doubt that picking him was the right decision. Beryl tries to remind Nidus that he hasn't accepted the job yet, but his words are completely ignored. Nidus points to his assistant Magon and tells Beryl that he can discuss the details of the job with him. But before any of that, Magon wants to clarify something. He asks Beryl if he has any prior experience as an adventurer, and Beryl answers no, so Magon begins to question whether Beryl is really suitable to train new adventurers. Beryl is really happy that Magon said that because now he might not have to accept the job anymore, but Magon's comment pissed off Serena and Lucy since they both already vouched for Beryl, yet Magon is still doubting him. With all due respect, Magon is just looking out for the safety of the adventurers because there have been reports of strange monster behavior recently. Nidus understands the point that Magon is trying to make, so he asks what Beryl would need to do to earn his approval. Magon says that if Beryl can win a duel against the black-ranked Serena, that he will prove himself to be a qualified teacher. That seems simple enough, and since Serena is on board with the idea, much to Beryl's dismay, Nidus says he will organize the duel right away. Before long, Beryl and Serena are both on the training grounds, and a huge crowd has already gathered around them. They are all eager to see who the legendary Serena is going to be fighting, and Serena is equally excited to get to fight her master again. Back when Serena was a little girl, she and her parents were on a trading caravan, but midway through the journey, they were attacked by a beast that tore the carriage to shreds. In a desperate effort to save their daughter, Serena's parents threw her off the nearby cliff, so she was the only one to survive the incident that day. And when she finally woke up, she found Beryl standing over her. He took her back to his house to treat her wounds, and once she was feeling a little better, he started asking her a few questions. He got her to tell him that her name was Serena, but when he asked about her parents, she started having a panic attack, so Beryl told her to just rest up some more until she felt better. Since Serena has nowhere else to go, Beryl asks his parents if they would be willing to let her live here, at least until they can find a new home for her, and his parents agreed. So from that day on, Serena was practically part of the family. At first she was hesitant to open up to them, but then one morning she happened to see Beryl training with his sword. Beryl could tell that she was intrigued, so he asked her if she wanted to join him. Serena then began training with Beryl every chance she could get, and as he taught her the basics of swordsmanship, the two of them bonded a lot. As a result, Serena became more outgoing. And one morning, as Beryl was getting ready to be in classes at his dojo, he saw Serena waiting outside with her sword in hand, so he invited her to join in. Serena took her sword training very seriously, and she would have loved to stay with Beryl's family forever. But eventually a family came along who were willing to adopt her, so Beryl and his parents encouraged her to go with them because that's what they thought was best for her. Serena really didn't want to leave, but at the same time she didn't want to cause trouble for Beryl, so she thanked him for everything he had done for her and they went their separate ways. A few years after that, Serena had already become a gold-rank adventurer and she was out on an escort mission when the caravan was suddenly attacked by a group of bandits. The leader of the bandits was known to be a dangerously skilled swordsman, so her teammate warned her to be careful. But before he knew it, Serena had already jumped into the air to attack the bandits, and before long they were all unconscious on the ground. There are two main reasons that Serena chose to become an adventurer. One, because she wants to prevent as many tragedies as possible, so no one has to go through what she did. And secondly, she wants to put all the skills that Beryl taught her to good use. So now that she has the chance to face Beryl again after 20 years, she plans to show him just how much she has improved since he last saw her. Beryl isn't exactly thrilled about this duel, but he can see how excited Serena is, so as her master, it is his duty to give her a good fight. As the duel begins, Serena charges forward and starts attacking Beryl with a relentless barrage of sword strikes. She's incredibly fast, but Beryl is still able to keep up with her attacks, so she can't land a single hit. Serena is overjoyed by how this fight is turning out because it has been so long since she was able to fight someone at full strength without needing to worry about hurting them. And Beryl is pleased to see that Serena has grown so much in strength since the last time he saw her. He can tell that she has been diligently training non-stop to get to her current skill level, but she still isn't perfect yet because he has identified a flaw in her combat style. Her attacks with her left hand are a little stiff, so Beryl is able to stick his sword through the handle of hers and disarm her. Serena tries to counter him with her other sword, but in the process, Beryl sweeps her leg and points his sword to her neck while she's on the ground. With this, Beryl has officially won the duel, so the others come down to congratulate him on his victory, and Megan sincerely apologizes for doubting Beryl's skill. Beryl tells him there's no need to apologize since it's normal to be skeptical of a teacher whom you have never seen before, but now that he is satisfied with Beryl's skill, there's nothing stopping Beryl from becoming a special instructor here. The next day, Beryl meets with the adventurer's students in front of a dungeon, and their names are Porta, Nidri, and Sarlacats. As they step into the dungeon, Sarlacat's magic watch warns him that there are 6 monsters up ahead, so everyone gets ready for battle. Beryl and Serena are just here to make sure nothing bad happens, so they sit back and let the kids handle the fighting, and when they clash with the first set of goblins, they are able to defeat them in record time. The group continues to move forward, and before long they have finished exploring the dungeon without any major incidents occurring, so they all head back to the entrance. Once they return to town, the training will be complete, but Beryl finds it strange that there weren't many monsters in the dungeon. Just then, as Porta is about to leave the dungeon, Sarlacat's magic watch detects something so powerful that it shatters, and Beryl yells out for Porta to stop, but it was already too late. Lil Bro got snatched. Porta is still alive, but he is badly wounded and needs immediate medical attention. However, Beryl and Serena won't be able to help him until they've taken down the monster, and that's not going to be an easy task. This monster is a specially designated target called a Xenograble, and it is so strong that even the best adventurers would stand no chance, but the two of them have no choice but to fight it. The story continues. We see Beryl really wishes he hadn't come on this mission, but at least he has Serena with him, and since she's a black rank adventurer, she should be able to handle the griffin. And while she's doing that, Beryl plans to go help Ponta, but as he stretches his hand out to ask for a healing potion, Serena dabs him up and says she's going to help Ponta instead. Beryl doesn't even have time to respond before the griffin suddenly attacks him, so he rolls out of the way, and now he has no choice but to fight. As the griffin tries to claw at him, Beryl skillfully parries its strikes with his sword, and when an opportunity presents itself, he goes straight for the griffin's legs. Unfortunately, the scales around its legs are rock hard, so Beryl's slash did no damage. It's basically stuck playing defense here, but he needs to do his best in order to buy time for Serena to get Ponta to safety. However, while he was checking on Serena, he let his guard down for a brief moment, which almost cost him his life. Luckily, he was able to block it in time, but he still got cut pretty badly, so he needs to find a way to take this thing down before it takes him out. In situations like this, Beryl would usually focus his attacks on the monster's head, but because it can breathe fire, he will never be able to get close enough in a frontal assault. Instead, Beryl decides to attack it from the side, but the griffin spots him and counters with a tail swipe. Yet Beryl still manages to recover and slashes the griffin's tail off in one swing. This enrages the griffin, so it shoots a massive fireball at Beryl, who is forced to jump back. He already knew that cutting off its tail would send the griffin into a frenzy, but he didn't expect it to charge straight at him. It rams its head into Beryl's body, but while it definitely hurt, Beryl is still okay, so he repositions himself and decides to just wait out the tantrum. However, that's easier said than done, because while Beryl is still clinging onto its back, the griffin takes off and starts flying straight up. A fall from this height would be fatal for Beryl, so he holds on with everything he's got, but that just makes the griffin even angrier. It eventually returns to the ground, so Beryl jumps off his back, but now the griffin isn't holding back anymore. It uses its magic to keep the ground around it and turn ground into lava, forcing Beryl to stand on a rock to avoid being burned alive. But Beryl isn't the only one in danger of burning because the lava is flowing into the caves, and it's only a matter of time before the kids inside die from the heat. Beryl hears them screaming for help, and he doesn't have time to worry about his own safety anymore, so he starts running across the lava to attack, and for now, his boots are keeping him safe. However, as he clashes with the griffin, he still can't seem to make any progress against its hard body. The griffin starts shooting more fireballs at him, so he now has to run and dodge across the lava. As a result of one of the fireball explosions, Beryl is launched into the air, but he uses that to his advantage and stabs the griffin in its eye. The griffin screeches in agony and knocks Beryl away, and the good news is that Beryl's sword is still in its eye, so it can't see anymore. But the bad news is that Beryl no longer has a blade to fight or parry with, and the griffin looks like it's about to unleash hell on him. Just then, something gets the griffin's attention, so it looks up and there we see Serena jumping from a cliff with blades in hand to finish the griffin off. She slams into down at full speed, knocking it to the ground, and before the griffin could retaliate, she slashes its neck, killing it once and for all. Serena nemesis Beryl's broken sword in the griffin's eye, and she apologizes since this wouldn't have happened if she had come to help him sooner. Beryl tells her she doesn't need to worry about it. Besides, he is much more concerned about the trainees. Just then, the kids make their way out of the cave, and miraculously, they didn't suffer any major burns, so everything worked out fine in the end. The group heads back to the Adventurers Guild to report what happened to the Guildmaster, and he's shocked to hear that Beryl and Serena managed to defeat a named monster. Serena tells him that if Beryl hadn't graciously agreed to accompany them on the mission, she would have most certainly died against the griffin. Beryl tries to mention that Serena was the one who dealt the final blow, but she isn't interested in taking any credit for this. The Guildmaster praises Beryl for doing such a good job and promises to repay him for this someday, but in the meantime, he asked Beryl if he would be interested in becoming an adventurer, but Beryl immediately shuts that idea down. After that, he and Serena head outside, and Serena apologizes once more because the only reason Beryl got roped into all this was because she was bragging about his strength to everyone. Beryl tells her he doesn't mind, although he still doesn't think he's worthy of all the praise he has been getting. Even so, Serena tells him he was really strong and she is glad that she got a chance to fight alongside him in a life or death battle. Beryl thanks her as well because all the decisions Serena made were spot on, which is why they were all able to make it back alive. Serena is happy to hear Beryl praising her, but she doesn't think she deserves it. However, Beryl tells her she has earned every bit of his praise because she grew up to be an amazing adventurer. The next day, Beryl gets up early because he needs to do something about his broken sword, but he still doesn't know much about the capital, so he asks Karuni to guide him to a blacksmith shop. He thanks her for agreeing to his request on such short notice, but she was planning to go to a blacksmith anyway, so this is no trouble at all. Alucia also decided to tag along, but definitely not because she's jealous. She says she's here because choosing a sword is an important decision, and she wants to help Beryl make the best choice possible. But the truth is, she already missed all of her chances to go on a date with Beryl, so she can't let this opportunity slip through her fingers as well. They eventually arrive at the blacksmith, and the owner comes out to greet Karuni. Just then, he notices Beryl and he is shocked to see his master here of all places. Balder used to be one of Beryl's students years ago, and in case you're wondering, yes, he is older than Beryl. In fact, he was the oldest student Beryl ever trained at the time, and the whole reason he trained at Beryl's dojo was because he thought it would be important to know how to use a sword if he wanted to become a good blacksmith. Even so, he always took Beryl's lessons seriously, and by the looks of it, he was able to achieve his dream of becoming a blacksmith. Since everyone is here, Balder asks what he can do for them, so Karuni goes first and says she needs to have her short sword sharpened. Balder says he'd be happy to help, so he asks her to show it to him. Karuni hands over her sword, and Balder takes a long hard look at it, but after a few moments he drops it and tells her there's nothing he can do here because she's ruined the sword. Alucia thinks it's weird that Karuni ruined her sword since she's usually very precise when practicing. But if that's the case, then there's only one explanation for the state of the sword. Beryl turns to Kuruni and asks her how it feels when she holds the short sword. She thinks about it and tells him the sword feels light, but as soon as Beryl and Balder hear that, they know exactly what's wrong. They tell her that she isn't suited to use the short sword because if you can't feel the weight of your weapon, then you won't be able to wield it properly. With that said, they'll need to find a new sword for her, and Beryl thinks a two-handed greatsword might be a good fit. Kuruni is small, but she's also very strong, so she shouldn't have much trouble handling the weight. He asks Kuruni to try holding it, and it's a lot heavier than what she's used to, but it's not too heavy, so she should be able to swing it easily in combat. She decides to buy it since Beryl is the one who recommended it to her, and she likes how cool it looks when she carries it on her back. Now that Kuruni is done with her shopping, Beryl decides to start looking for a new sword for himself from Balder's collection, but Alucia insists that a swordsman of his caliber should have a sword custom made. Beryl doesn't think it's necessary to go that far, since the swords here should be more than good enough. But while he's still looking, Serena walks in with a huge sack. As soon as Alucia and Serena spot lock eyes, they start arguing because they can't stand each other, but Beryl changes the topic and asks Serena what she's doing here. Serena explains that she came because she has a special job she needs Balder to do. She drops her sack on the front desk and reveals that it's the leg of the griffin she and Beryl killed. She tells Balder that she wants him to make a long sword out of this thing. Balder is amazed because this is the first time he has ever been asked to make a long sword from a named monster corpse, but he wonders why Serena would even want a long sword when she's known for using twin blades. She explains that she actually wants to give the sword to Beryl, but Beryl doesn't think he deserves such a fancy sword. He reminds Serena she was the one who dealt the kill and blow, so she deserves to keep the monster leg for herself, but she insists on gifting him a sword since it's the only way she can make up for the sword Beryl lost. Balder suddenly chimes in and tells Beryl to just accept the gift already, but not because he's on Serena's side, it's because he really wants to try making an awesome sword out of maimed monster parts. Beryl eventually agrees to have a sword made from the monster's leg, but he can already tell by the look on Balder's face that he's going to try something crazy. He reminds Balder that he just wants a regular sword, and Balder promises not to make anything weird. But for some reason, Beryl doesn't trust him. In any case, Balder says it will take a while for him to complete his masterpiece, so he asks for a week, and Beryl has no problem with that time frame. So since all their business here is done, says it's time for them to leave. And as soon as he says this, Kuruni comes up to Beryl and asks for a small favor. Since she just bought a new sword, she's going to need to learn how to use it properly, so she asked Beryl to give her some private lessons. Beryl informs her that a great sword has two main functionalities. First, you can put a lot of force behind your swings. It's best to swing laterally to make good use of your momentum. Secondly, you can hold the sword by the ricasso to make it easier to maneuver. Kuruni tries it out, and it brings back memories because back when she was part of Beryl's dojo, she spent ages learning how to swing her sword properly. Later that night, Beryl is walking home alone, and along the way he notices a child coming his way. Normally he'd think nothing of it, but as they pass each other, she tries reaching into Beryl's jacket to steal his money. Beryl catches her in the act and grabs her arm so she can't get away, but all of a sudden she blasts Beryl with fire magic to distract him. Her plan works because Beryl was forced to let go of her to protect himself. She then runs off into the night and eventually enters a rundown building with a bunch of men gambling inside. As she walks past them, she hands over all the money she successfully stole that night, but the men aren't satisfied with the amount, so they accuse her of slacking off. However, their boss speaks up and tells them to be quiet because Mui would never intentionally do that after all. She knows there'll be consequences if she ever goes against him. Mui's face remains expressionless, but she knows how cruel the boss can be, so she can afford to keep making mistakes. However, she suddenly realizes she made a massive mistake because in her hurry to run away from Beryl, she accidentally dropped her ring on the ground and Beryl just found it. The story continues. We see the next day at the training hall, Kuruni is still practicing with her new great sword, and Henblitz is sparring with Beryl on the other side of the hall. So far he hasn't managed to land a single hit on Beryl yet, so as he charges in for one final strike, he feeds an overhead slash and targets Beryl's abdomen instead. Beryl is impressed by the technique, but he is still able to counter it, so Henblitz loses. Henblitz thanks Beryl for the lesson, and Beryl praises him for improving so much in a short time. That feat was almost perfectly executed, but it still wasn't enough to overcome Beryl's reflexes. Just then, Henblitz looks over to Kuruni, and he mentions how it takes a lot of guts to suddenly switch weapons like she did, but she shows a lot of promise. And it's really important that the Knight's Order improves his fighting power, so they can go against the group of thieves known as the Dark Hand of Twilight. The Twilight Thieves have recently begun operations in the capital, and they are causing a lot of trouble, so the Royal Guard and Knights Order are investigating. And as soon as they locate the Twilight hideout, they plan to raid the place and apprehend all the thieves. But to be safe, they'll need all the force they can get, and Kuruni is a bit of a powerhouse. Of course, Blitz is sure Beryl would be able to single-handedly take down the Twilight Thieves, but he doesn't want to bother him with boring work like this, so he tells him he can leave all the fighting to the Knights of the Knights Order. But it's not like Beryl wanted to fight anyway. He has never fought against criminals before, and he doesn't plan on starting anytime soon. But he remembers the ring he got off that pickpocket yesterday, and he wonders if it might help with the investigation. However, as soon as Kuruni spots the ring in his hand, she thinks Beryl is planning to give it to someone as a gift, and Blitz agrees with her. Beryl tries to explain that the ring isn't a gift, but before he could say anything, Kuruni tells him he might need to get a bigger ring if he wants to propose to Alucia, because this one looks like it only fit a child. Beryl has no idea where she got the idea that he's going to propose to anyone, but he finally gets a chance to speak and explain that he was targeted by a pickpocket yesterday. He managed to grab her hand before she could steal anything, but she managed to escape because Beryl got startled when she used fire magic on him. Kuruni thinks this whole thing sounds strange because if the girl can use magic, then she wouldn't need to be a pickpocket. Magic is a rare talent, so anyone with magic can join the Magic Institute for free and have all living expenses paid for. Blitz suggests that the girl might have been using a magical accessory to cast the fire, but in any case, he asks Beryl what he plans to do with the ring. Beryl says he doesn't plan on keeping it, and since the ring is most likely stolen, he wants to return it to its rightful owner. If that is the case, then Blitz tells him he can leave the ring at the front desk of the Knights Order, and that's exactly what Beryl does. Now that he has taken care of the ring, Beryl doesn't plan to get involved in this any further. He didn't lose anything to the pickpocket, and he has no intention of tracking her down. But at the same time, the way she looked at him when he caught her doesn't sit right with him. While walking through town, Beryl decides to take a look at the housing market since he can't keep living in an inn forever, but the prices nearly give him a heart attack. He could technically afford it with how much he gets paid by the Knights Order, but it's still a lot of money to spend. Just then, he notices a girl behind him and she seems to be looking for something, so he goes over to see if he can help. But after getting a closer look at her, he realizes it's the girl that tried to rob him last night. He asks her if she happens to be looking for a ring, and after hearing him mention the ring, the girl attacks him because she thinks he took it. But Beryl asks her to please calm down because he doesn't want to cause a scene. Firstly, he tells her he dropped the ring off at the Knights Order front desk, so he doesn't have it anymore, and the girl can't exactly walk into the Knights Order to get it back. Secondly, Beryl asks her if she stole the ring, because it seems odd that she'd go through so much effort to get it back if it wasn't important to her. She tells him she didn't steal the ring, and that's all Beryl needed to hear, so he tells her to come with him so he can get it back with her. Mui is a little hesitant to follow him, but he tells her it will be hard to prove that the ring is hers if she goes by herself. However, if Beryl vouches for her, it shouldn't take long to get it back. Mui reluctantly agrees to follow him, but she makes it clear that she isn't happy about it. After they arrive at the Knights Order HQ, Beryl gets the ring back, but before he gives it to Mui, he says he would like to have a little chat with her. Just then, Alucia comes out, and when she sees Beryl arguing with Mui, the first thought that comes from her mind is that this must be a secret love child that he never talks about, but Beryl immediately denies it. They all head inside so Beryl can explain the whole situation to Alucia, and now that she knows what's going on, she asks Beryl what he wants to do with Mui. Normally, as a knight, it would be Alucia's job to arrest Mui for theft, but Beryl doesn't want to get her in trouble. He asks Mui if she'll stop pickpocketing if he lets her go, but she doesn't answer the question, and just tells him to give the ring back to her. She clearly doesn't intend to stop pickpocketing, but the fact that she didn't lie about it tells Beryl that she's an honest kid at heart. Alucia recalls hearing that Mui used magic against Beryl, so she asks her if she used a magical accessory to do it, or if it was natural. Mui says she did it on her own, so Alucia explains that if she has a talent for magic, then the kingdom will take care of all her needs so she doesn't need to rely on pickpocketing to survive. Mui is starting to open up a little, so she explains that she can't stop because she needs to pay 5 million delk. Her boss told her that if she paid him that amount, then he would use magic to bring her sister back to life. But she doesn't have enough time to earn that money legally, so she turned to crime. Beryl immediately realizes that Mui's boss must be lying to her because bringing people back to life isn't possible. But there's no way she would believe him if he said that right now. Just then, Alucia decides to step out because there's something she needs to check, and in the meantime, Beryl and Mui are left alone. Beryl asks her if she'd like to eat some cookies, and Mui declines, but she's clearly hungry, so he thinks him a good idea. So he leaves for a moment and comes back with a loaf of bread for Mui. As soon as he hands her the bread, Mui starts devouring it. Beryl is glad he ran into her today because he has been worried about Mui ever since he saw that sad look on her face yesterday, so getting the chance to help her out even a little makes him happy. With that said, he has kept her here long enough so he gives Mui's ring back to her. And now that she has what she came for, Mui says she's leaving. However, before she could walk out the door, Lucy barges in because Alucia told her about Mui having magical potential. Lucy introduces herself as the head of the magical corps and invites Mui to join the Magical Institute because magic users are always welcome. However, Mui rejects the offer because she can't earn 5 million dalk at the Magical Institute. Lucy asks Mui what she plans to use all that money for, so Mui explains that she's going to pay a wizard to resurrect her dead sister. But as soon as she says this, Lucy tells her she's being scammed because resurrection magic doesn't exist. However, Mui still insists that her sister can be resurrected because she saw it for herself, or at least that's what she believes, because in her flashback all this so-called wizard actually does is make her sister's corpse move a little, and Mui was so grief-stricken that she immediately believed he could really resurrect her sister. However, the wizard said it would cost 5 million dalk to fully resurrect Mui's sister, so she's been pickpocketing ever since to earn the money. Lucy feels bad that Mui fell for such a sinister trick, but she tells Mui that there really is no such thing as resurrection magic. Mui accuses Lucy of lying, but Lucy points out that she is a well-respected mage who has studied magic for several centuries, so if resurrection magic was a thing, she would know about it long before some random fake wizard would. By this point, Mui is starting to realize that she may have been tricked, so Lucy asks her for the name of the wizard that started all this. Mui asks why she wants to know, so Lucy explains that she plans to confront him and figure out whether he's lying about resurrection magic or not. On the off chance that he is telling the truth, then Lucy promises to personally pay the 5 million dalk to resurrect Mui's sister. But if a man is lying, then that means he has dishonored the soul of Mui's sister, and Lucy refuses to let that slide. Mui informs her that the man's name is Twilight, and that's the name of the leader of the Twilight Thieves, so Lucy asks Mui to lead her to him immediately. Alucia says she wants to come along as well, but having a knight around would draw too much attention, so instead she asks Beryl to come with her. Before long, they arrive at the entrance to Twilight's lair, and Beryl is surprised that a den of thieves is located right off the main road. Beryl is starting to wish he had borrowed a real sword for this fight, but Lucy assures him that with his skills, a wooden sword should be more than enough to handle some bandits. There's no point in waiting any longer, so Lucy blows a hole through the front door and they are immediately confronted by a group of thieves. One of the thieves tries to grab Lucy, but she doesn't have time to deal with losers like him, so she blasts the thief away and asks Beryl to handle the rest while she goes to deal with Twilight. The thieves spot Mui behind Beryl, and they realize she's the one who ratted them out, so one of them tries to attack her, but Beryl swiftly pokes him in the throat. He's only got a wooden sword, so the bandits will most likely survive, but getting hit in the throat with a wooden sword still hurts like hell, so they're starting to hesitate. While Beryl is dealing with everyone upstairs, Lucy heads into the basement to confront Twilight, and as soon as he sees her, he uses a magic accessory to drop ice balls on Lucy. However, Lucy is a master mage, so something like this could never stop her. She melts her way out of the ice, but Twilight has more magic accessories up his sleeve, so he uses some telekinesis magic to pick Lucy up, and Lucy realizes that this is what he must have used to trick Mui. Twilight admits that he used telekinesis to move her sister's corpse and pretended it was necromancy. And he still finds it funny how gullible Mui was to believe he could really resurrect people. He then prepares a fireball in an attempt to finish Lucy off, but Lucy's patience has run out, so she casts a wind spell in front of Twilight and knocks him out with a pressure. Meanwhile, upstairs, Beryl has just finished beating up most of the bandits, but one of them gets back up and starts accusing Mui of being an ungrateful brat after everything Twilight has done for her. But that makes Beryl mad, so he pokes him in the throat again and knocks the dude out. Eventually, Lucy comes out of the basement with Twilight's body, and she orders him to tell Mui the truth unless he wants to get hit with another wind blast. Twilight admits to Mui that he was lying about resurrection magic, and Mui is devastated to hear this because it means her sister is really gone forever. Now that they've taken all the bandits out, Lucy says she's going to go call the Knight's orders so they can arrest Twilight and his crew. Later on, all the bandits have been loaded onto a cart and are going to be hauled off to prison. Alucia thanks Beryl and Lucy for their help, but there's still a lot of investigating to do, since those magic accessories that Twilight was using were way too powerful for someone like him to acquire on his own. That means there must be someone pulling his strings, and they need to find out who that person is. As Twilight and the other bandits are being hauled off, a man watches from the shadows. The cloakman then points his hand at the cart, and suddenly Twilight's body begins to glow from the inside just before he dies a painful death. The cloakman later goes to report to his boss that Twilight has been successfully silenced thanks to the magic device they implanted in him, so there's no risk of their plans getting leaked. The Pope is glad to hear this because he intends to use these corpses that Twilight gathered for him to recreate a miracle with his own hands, and he won't let anything stop him. The story continues. We see the next day, after Beryl is done training the knights, Alucia approaches him because she has something she needs to say. She tells Beryl that while Twilight was being transported yesterday, he suddenly exploded out of nowhere, leaving nothing but a magic device behind. The Magic Corps is currently investigating the origins of the magic device, but they haven't found anything yet. Beryl asks about the corpses that went missing under Twilight's care, and Alucia already tried questioning some of Twilight's underlings, but none of them seemed to know anything about what he did with the bodies. All this points to the fact that Twilight was taking orders from someone else, and they need to figure out who it is as soon as possible. Later that day, Beryl heads back to the blacksmith's shop to pick up his new sword, and he is really impressed with how it turned out. He can't wait to try it out once he and Karuni get back to the training hall, but as he's approaching, he sees Lucy waiting for him outside, and from the looks of it, she's here for something important. She tells him she has something urgent to talk about, so she invites him to her house for a meeting. A few minutes later, they arrive at Lucy's home, and Beryl is surprised because he had no idea that she lived in such an impressive mansion. While he's here, he asks how Mui is doing, and Lucy tells him that she's still trying to convince her to study magic. They both head inside, and after getting herself a cup of tea, Lucy decides to introduce Beryl to the man sitting across from him. His name is Ibroy Howman, and he's a priest from the Church of Sphene. Beryl is happy to meet him, but he has no idea why someone from the church is here. Lucy explains that the magical devices that Twilight had were all created by the nation of Sphene, but they were funneled into the hands of a criminal like Twilight by a bishop named Revios Sarleon. And in return for the magic devices, Bishop Revios asked Twilight to collect dead bodies for him. That explains why Twilight ended up being silenced by a magic device, but Beryl still doesn't understand why Revios would want dead bodies in the first place. Ibroy tells him that in the Church of Sphene, magic is thought of as a miracle, and of all the miracles that can be performed, there is one that is said to be most difficult, resurrecting the dead. Of course, Ibroy doesn't really think it is possible to resurrect the dead, but Revios is most likely conducting research on it, which is why he acquired those dead bodies. If Ibroy knows all this, then Beryl asks why he hasn't done anything to stop Revios yet, but unfortunately it's not that simple. Revios is currently at the Sphene Church in the northern district of this town, and the Knights' Order plans to call him in tomorrow to question him. Hopefully he will comply with the order, but there's also the chance that he attempts to flee to the border, and if Revios manages to make it back to the nation of Sphene, the Knights' Order won't be able to touch him, which is why they were hoping Beryl would help them out, because they need someone to capture Revios if he tries to escape. Normally, the Knights' Order or Magic Corps could easily apprehend him, but taking such aggressive actions against a bishop of Sphene could cause an international incident, and Ibroy can't do it either, since he doesn't have the power to stand up to a bishop. Beryl, on the other hand, is both strong enough to subdue Revios and has no official affiliation with the Kingdom of Libres, so it's politically acceptable for him to carry out the arrest. Lucy has already informed Alucia of the situation, so Beryl has complete permission to do whatever it takes to stop Revios, but that's only if he flees. If the crimes he's accused of are true, then Lucy wants to make sure that Revios is punished for what he is trying to do. Beryl, on the other hand, doesn't really care if a bishop is trying to raise the dead, but there's a chance that he might be able to recover the body of Mui's sister for her. Mui's sister isn't going to come back, but if Mui were given the chance to properly mourn her sister, then maybe she could move on, so Beryl eventually decides to agree to Lucy's request. Lucy is grateful, and she promises that she will pay Beryl a fair amount as a reward. But as Beryl opens the front door to leave, he runs into Mui, who just got back from a shopping trip. Mui wasn't expecting to see Beryl today, so she asks him what he is doing here, and Beryl tells her he just came to have a quick chat with Lucy. But with that said, he is also happy he got the chance to see Mui again, and even happier to see that she is doing well. Mui is still having a hard time understanding why Beryl and Lucy went so far to help her. She was a thief who tried to steal from Beryl, yet they saved her from Twilight, and now they are giving her a place to live and taking care of her. She doesn't understand why they care about her so much, and Beryl knows she must be confused by how much her life has changed overnight, but he tells her she doesn't need to overthink it. None of the adults here will ever deceive or take advantage of her like Twilight did, so she can just relax and enjoy her youth from now on. Mui asks if it's really okay for her to live a good life, and Beryl assures her that she has a bright and promising future ahead of her. He tries to pat her head, but Mui smacks his hand away because she doesn't like being treated like a child. Beryl decides to leave her be for now because she'll eventually warm up to everyone around her, and a few moments later he leaves Lucy's house. Later that night, Beryl is sneaking around the Northern District Church to see if Revios is up to something, and sure enough, he finds out that Revios and his men are loading up their stuff so they can flee the country. He tries sneaking around the back so he can stop Revios, but he is stopped by a man in a cloak. The man recognizes Beryl as the one who took down all of Twilight's minions, and he already anticipated that Beryl would be sent to stop them. Beryl knows this isn't going to work, but he still has to inform them that Revios is going to be called in for questioning tomorrow, so he isn't allowed to leave the country. But as expected, the Spur doesn't care about the order at all and calls 3 swordsmen to take care of Beryl. He even gives them permission to use magic against him, so the 3 swordsmen touch blade tips and chant a spell to boost their strength and speed. They are now much faster than they were before, so Beryl is going to have a hard time keeping up now. While those 3 are keeping Beryl occupied, Revios and Spur head back into the church to finish packing up their stuff so they can escape. It's been a while since Beryl has had a fight with killing intent, but if he holds back against these guys, he won't make it out of here alive. So as the first one charges at him, Beryl swiftly dodges and slashes him across the chest. The other 2 now realize how dangerous Beryl is, so they attack him together to stall while reinforcements close in. Now Beryl is surrounded by 5 boosted attackers, and even for him, this is a bit too much to handle alone. Luckily he isn't alone, and just as one of the swordsmen's about to slash Beryl, a wind spell knocks his blade out of his hand. Ficelle then runs up and tells Beryl she's here to help him, and Karuni is here too. But Beryl has no idea why they are here, since the whole point of this was for the Knights Order and Magic Corps to avoid getting directly involved. The 2 explain that they aren't here on official orders. They just happened to be passing by and decided to help Beryl. That's all. Beryl isn't sure if that's how this works, but he is glad to have the help, so together the 3 of them begin cutting their attackers down. At one point, Beryl clashes with one of the swordsmen, and a few moments later the blue glow in his body fades. The swordsman freezes up and falls over when this happens, so Beryl takes the opportunity to knock him out, even though he doesn't understand what just happened. Ficelle explains that their buff spells must be wearing off, so they are suffering the backlash now, and that should make them easy to defeat. But there are still more reinforcements heading this way, so Ficelle and Karuni tell Beryl that they can handle things here, so he should go after Revios. Beryl thanks them for the help and runs into the church to chase after Revios, but before he could get to him, Spur steps forward while Revios begins casting a spell. He tells Beryl that he is going to be the first to witness the miracle of life that Revios dedicated his life to studying, and once his spell is complete, the coffins nearby begin to shake. A few moments later, the corpses inside begin to move, and it seems like Revios was successful in his research into resurrection magic, or at least half successful, because these people are pretty much just zombies. Among the zombies, Beryl spots Mui's sister, and he remembers how badly Mui wanted her sister to be revived, but he also knows that Mui wouldn't want to see her sister in this state, so he has a tough choice to make. He is going to have to destroy the corpses, so as one of the zombies grabs his leg, Beryl chops his head off. The zombie then bursts into blue flames, so Beryl does the same thing to the rest of them until the only one left is Mui's sister. He wanted to give Mui a chance to mourn by returning her sister's corpse but it doesn't look like that's possible anymore, so he apologizes before striking her neck. Mui's sister then disintegrates in blue flames, leaving nothing but a ring behind. But Beryl's troubles aren't over yet because Spur comes back to finish him off and charges at Beryl with full force. Beryl parries his initial attack, but Spur is a lot more skilled than Beryl thought he would be, so he manages to catch Beryl off guard and stab him in the shoulder. But that doesn't mean Beryl is going to let himself lose. He recomposes himself and runs straight at Spur with determination, and as Spur tries to slash him, Beryl moves out of the way before slashing Spur across the shoulder. Spur never could have imagined that an old man like Beryl would be able to keep up with him after using his magic boost. But he still has one more trick up his sleeve, so he takes out a dagger and stabs himself in the side to give himself an extra boost in power. He then charges at Beryl once more, and this time Beryl is having a hard time keeping up with all Spur's slashes, so he is getting small cuts all over his body. It is clear that Spur is one of the toughest opponents Beryl has ever had to face, but that doesn't mean Beryl is going to give up. If he can't match Spur's speed, then he's just going to have to outmaneuver him, so Spur thrusts his sword at Beryl again. Beryl leans into the strike to parry it with his shoulder. Sure, Beryl suffers a serious wound to his shoulder, but it gives him the opening he needs to get past Spur's guard and slash him across the chest. That should have been enough to put him down, but somehow Spur is still standing. Even after the backlash from his boss hits him, he still keeps walking towards Beryl despite the fact that he is bleeding from every part of his body. Beryl tells him to stop because he has already lost this battle, but as long as Spur breathes, he's never going to stop fighting. Beryl is amazed and horrified by Spur's resilience, but it doesn't take long before his injuries finally catch up to him and finally falls to the ground dead. Now that everything is over, Beryl heads outside and finds that Karuni and Ficelle were able to capture Revios, so he thanks them for a job well done. He then turns to Revios, but there isn't an ounce of remorse on his face whatsoever. Even when he is told that Spur was defeated, he simply says Spur must have gladly sacrificed himself for their cause. And even if they were able to catch him, it won't change anything, because unless a miracle by blood is created, the world is doomed. Beryl has no idea what Revios is talking about, but he assumes it's just crazy talk, so the next morning he meets with Lucy to tell her everything that happened, but he is still really bummed out because he couldn't get Mui's sister's body back here in one piece. Lucy can see that he is upset, so to cheer him up, she tells him to follow her so she can give him that reward she promised. She leads him to a house in the middle of town and tells him this is his reward. Beryl is a bit shocked, but he has been looking for a house recently, so this works out perfectly for him. Lucy urges him to go take a look inside, and to Beryl's surprise, he finds Mui sweeping the hallway. He asks her what she's doing, so Lucy explains that last night she and Mui had a talk and Mui decided that she is going to enroll in the Magic Academy. But to do that, she's going to need a legal guardian, so starting today, she will be living with Beryl as her father figure. The story continues. We see it has been 5 days since Beryl moved into his new house, and while he's thrilled about owning a home with a garden and indoor plumbing, he still hasn't gotten used to it yet. That and the fact that he now has to take care of a teenager on his own. Mui comes down to have breakfast and Beryl asks her if she likes the food he made, but all Mui says is that she is fine with it as long as it's edible. Switching topics, Beryl offers to wash Mui's clothes from yesterday, but Mui says she can handle it herself, which would be fine. But last time Beryl let her wash her own clothes, she just dumped water over them and called it a day. There's a few seconds of awkward silence after that until Mui finally speaks up, but she's not trying to start a conversation or anything, she just wants to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. Beryl reminds her that this is her house too, so she doesn't need to ask for permission for that kind of thing. Mui says she understands and promises that she won't ask Beryl for permission for anything from now on, but with how she worded it, Beryl gets the feeling this is going to be a problem later. Beryl has had plenty of experience with teenagers around Mui's age, but it's a whole different story now that he's taking care of one. In any case, it's going to be difficult to live with her if she's on her guard around him all the time, so he needs to find a way to break the ice with her. He remembers that Karuni and Ficelle really like the skewer from the market, so he buys one for Mui and she says she likes it, but she doesn't give much of a visual reaction. The next step in Beryl's plan to bond with Mui is to go to the theater with her and see a play. He asks Mui if she would like to go in with him and she agrees, so the two enjoy the play and after it's done they have an actual conversation about it, which is a great start to bonding. The next morning, Mui heads out because it's her first day of school and Beryl comes with her for moral support. She tells him he doesn't need to do this, but Beryl insists because as her guardian, he needs to come to the school at least once. Although it's not like Beryl has any personal interest in the Magic Institute, they soon arrive at the Institute's gates and the place is a lot bigger than Beryl expected, so it may take them a while to find their way around. Just then, a woman calls out to them and asks if the two of them are the new transfer student and her parent. Beryl confirms it, so the woman introduces herself as Kinera and tells them that she is a teacher here at the Magic Institute. She offers to show them where to go, and Beryl thanks her for the help because he had no idea how to navigate this place. While walking through the halls, Kinera asks Beryl, who introduced him and Mui to the Magic Institute, so Beryl tells her it was Lucy. Kinera is surprised to hear that the principal of the Magic Institute personally invited them here, but a letter of recommendation like that will allow Mui to skip the aptitude test so they can enroll her immediately. Kinera asks Mui if she has decided on a magic major yet, but neither Mui nor Beryl has heard of that before. Kinera explains that there are several systems of magic, and most wizards have their strengths and weaknesses, so Mui will need to choose one to focus on. Mui tells her that the only thing she can do is produce flames, so Kinera thinks offensive magic would be the best fit for Mui, but Beryl is still a little confused. Kinera goes on to explain that there are 5 categories of magic: offensive, defensive, healing, enhancing and lifestyle, and producing flames is a type of offensive magic, which is why Kinera suggested it to Mui. Anyway, now that Mui's major has been decided, Kinera asks if she would like to stay in the Institute's dorms or not. Beryl and Mui had no idea that there were even dorms to begin with, so Kinera asked them if they would like to get a tour, and they agreed. Kinera leaves Beryl and Mui to the female dorms, and this place is massive. There's a dining hall where students get 3 meals a day, a bath, and even fully furnished rooms for each student. Mui seemed like she really liked the dorms, and Beryl thinks it looked pretty nice too, but he is worried that Mui might not fit in well with the other kids there. She still acts cold and dismissive whenever he talks to her, so he thinks it might be best if she continues to live with him for a while. However, it soon occurs to him that she may only be acting this way because he's an old man, so she might have an easier time relating with people her own age. They happen to walk past a sausage restaurant, and it looks like the place is having a special today, so Beryl asks Mui if she's fine with stopping here for lunch. Mui has no complaints, but when they head inside, the place is packed with sausage lovers, leaving no space for them to sit. However, just as Beryl is about to leave, he hears someone call out to him, so he looks around and sees Serena waving at him. She tells Beryl he's free to come sit at her table if he wants, and Beryl decides to take her up on her offer. Beryl and Mui sit down at Serena's table, and since he's here, he takes the opportunity to thank her for the new sword because it really came in hand the other day. Serena tells him there's no need to thank her, but she's also a bit curious about the girl that came with Beryl, so she asks him who she is. Beryl tells her it's a long story, but to put it simply, Mui is his daughter now and she's living in his house. Serena nearly choked on her drink after hearing that, but once she regains her composure, she apologizes for her outburst. Just then, their food arrives, and while they eat, Beryl asks Serena what she's been up to lately. She tells him that there have been a lot of monster hunts near the capital recently, mostly because a delegation from the nation of Sphene will be visiting soon. Beryl had no idea any of this was happening, but there's apparently a yearly meeting between ally nations and the guild is required to hunt all the monsters in the area to ensure the safety of the delegation. Once they are all done with their meal, they head outside and Beryl tells Mui she can head home without him because he needs to head to the Knight's Order now. But before he leaves, he tells Serena that Mui will be attending the Magic Institute, so he would appreciate it if she could give Mui some words of encouragement. Serena is surprised to learn that Mui has magical talent, so she gets a Mui's face, and tells her she better work hard because the other students at the Magic Institute don't mess around, and with Beryl as her guardian, she had better not lose to anyone. Mui says she already knows how strong Beryl is for an old man, but hearing Mui called Beryl, an old man gets Serena angry. She's about to start yelling, but Beryl calms her down before she does anything she might regret. Serena apologizes for flaring up like that, but she just wants Mui to understand how great of a man Beryl really is, and Mui admits that she knows firsthand how cool Beryl can be. After that, Mui says goodbye and starts heading home, and Beryl is surprised because it looked like Mui opened up to Serena a bit while they were talking. Serena tells Beryl that Mui has some solid potential in her. She's still a little rough around the edges, but she's an honest girl, so she bound go far. Beryl is glad to hear that, but for Mui to reach her full potential, she needs the perfect environment to grow in, and Beryl still isn't sure whether it's best to have her stay with him or to let her stay in the dorms. Over at the training grounds, Beryl is talking to Alucia about Mui and asks if it's better for Mui to move into the dorms or to continue living with him. Alucia freaks out once she hears that Mui is living with Beryl because no one told her about this, but that's not the point right now. Kuruni comes over and tells Beryl that the dorms are better because there's no commute time and she gets free meals every day. Beryl is aware of the benefits of the dorms, but he is still a bit worried that Mui won't be able to adjust to living with other people. However, Henblitz comes over and tells him the only way for Mui to become comfortable with new people is for her to meet new people. Alucia also joins in and says Mui should go to the dorms, but not because she actually put any thought into it. She just doesn't want Mui to keep living with Beryl. Later that evening, Beryl goes to Lucy's office to ask for her opinion on the matter, and logically speaking, Lucy thinks the dorms are better, although she's sure Beryl has his reasons for worrying so much about it. Just then, Ficelle walks in because she has a report to give Lucy, and since she's here, Lucy decides to ask Ficelle what she thinks about the dorms. Ficelle says there's literally no reason to stay away from the dorms because it's so convenient, but she wonders why Beryl and Lucy are bringing this up now. Lucy reminds Ficelle of Mui, the girl who was transferring to the Magic Institute, and Ficelle remembers her because she might end up teaching Mui at some point. Beryl is confused, so he asks her what she means, and Lucy explains that the Institute is short-staffed right now, so Ficelle became an instructor here due to her incredible talent. Ficelle is really proud of herself, and Beryl is proud of how amazing she is, but he still needs to deal with his Mui dilemma. Beryl suddenly gets up and leaves because he has a lot he needs to think about. He's been trying to give Mui the best life possible as her guardian, and it made him happy when Mui agreed to move in with him. But he also saw how excited Mui looked when she saw the dorms, so he knows what the best option is. A little while later, Beryl gets home with a bag of groceries, and as soon as he sets the bag down, Mui asks him if he can help her with something. She's been hearing a strange noise from the dresser for a while now, and she has no idea what it is. Beryl decides to take a look, so he gets down to see if he can hear the sound too, and there's definitely something there. He picks the dresser up and moves it so he can see what's causing the noise, and to his surprise, he finds a hole in the wall. A few seconds later, a couple of rats run out and Mui doesn't seem all too bothered because she's lived in rat-infested buildings all her life. But Beryl, on the other hand, goes into battle mode and prepares to evict the rats from existence. He manages to chase one out the door, but the other two strategize and run under the table, so Beryl can't get them with a broom. Beryl is forced to adapt, so he takes his shirt off and tries using it to catch the rats, but they keep evading him at every turn. Eventually, Beryl gets fed up and just flips the table altogether, and he manages to squish one rat underneath, but there's one more left to deal with. He follows it into the bathroom and it's running around the tub, so he tries to grab it with his hands. Beryl would have no trouble catching it if it were a person, but he doesn't understand how rats think, so he just keeps grabbing at it. However, the rat keeps outpacing him and even manages to run across Beryl's arm to evade him. However, before it could make its escape, Mui blocks the rat's path with a little fire. This scares the rat enough to make it jump backward, and that opening was more than enough for Beryl to grab it out of the air. With this, the final rat has been caught, but Beryl is surprised that Mui went out of her way to help him, even though she's used to rats. After that, Beryl gets a rat-repellent ball from one of their neighbors so the rats won't come back, and then heads back into the kitchen to start making dinner. He is starting to realize that Mui may not be as cold as he initially thought. She came to him for help when she heard a strange noise, and she even helped him out with catching the rat, despite the fact that she said it didn't bother her. If she can work with other people like this, then maybe he doesn't need to worry about her living in the dorms. Just then, Mui enters the kitchen, so Beryl tells her she's going to have to wait a little longer for dinner to be ready. However, Mui says she actually wants to help Beryl with the food prep, and that makes Beryl happy because it means she really is warming up to him. A little while later, Mui and Beryl sit down to have dinner, and Beryl thanks her for the help. She tells him it's not a problem, but she's planning to improve her cooking skills so she can handle making dinner on her own soon. Beryl is a little confused since the dorms would provide meals for her, but Mui tells him she doesn't want to stay in the dorms. She would much rather stay with Beryl and commute from here. Beryl tries to convince her that the dorm would be better, but Mui already made her decision. Beryl is always spoiling her with so much kindness, and she'd like to return the favor, so she wants to help him out as much as possible. Beryl is touched to learn that Mui really does care about him, so he agrees to let her stay here if that's what she really wants. The story continues. We see a few days go by, and after training is over, Alucia approaches Beryl because she has something to tell him. He needs to get some new clothes. A delegation from the Kingdom of Sven will be here arriving in a few days, and the Knight's Order has been asked to guard the officials from Sven while the delegation takes place. Beryl assumes the leaders of the Church of Sven will be coming, and he is worried that he might have to deal with more people like Revios, but Henblitz tells him that delegations are usually handled by high-ranking politicians and the royal families of both nations. With that said, Alucia has been thinking about having Beryl meet the royal families of both countries. Kuruni and Henblitz think it's a great idea since Beryl will become known across multiple nations, but Beryl thinks meeting the royal family is a bit above his pay grade. However, Alucia reminds him that he is a special instructor who was hired with the royal family seal of approval, so he have to meet them sooner or later. And if he's going to be meeting royalty, his usual outfit just isn't going to cut it. Henblitz adds that members of the Knight's Order are allowed to wear either their armor or their ceremonial uniform, but since Beryl isn't a member of the Order, he needs to find some appropriate clothing for the occasion. Beryl understands the point they are making, so he says he can go shopping for some formal attire when he has time, but Alucia refuses to let him go alone. Part of the reason she even suggested this is because she hasn't had a chance to go on a date with Beryl yet, so she makes up an excuse about Beryl being unfamiliar with the clothing shops of the capital, so it is very important that she goes with him. Beryl says he's fine with her coming with him, and Alucia is glad she finally gets to spend some time with Beryl, so she tells him to meet her tomorrow afternoon, but in the meantime, she has some work that she needs to attend to. As Alucia walks off, Kuruni asks Henblitz if he noticed that Alucia was being really aggressive about going clothes shopping with Beryl. Henblitz assumes she just cares a lot about Beryl's image since he is her master, but Kuruni thinks it's a lot deeper than that. Later that day, Beryl returns home and Mui tells him a package was delivered earlier today. Beryl reads the note on the front and it's a thank you message from Ebroy. He wanted to give Beryl a gift to show his appreciation for Beryl's help, so he sent over a bunch of clothes for Mui. Mui doesn't think all these frilly outfits would suit her, but Beryl says there are bound to be some good dresses in here, so she can just pick out the ones she likes later. For now, it's time for them to have dinner, so they both sit down and begin eating. While they are having dinner, Beryl tells Mui that he's going to be guarding some important people at work soon and he needs to get some proper clothes, so he's going shopping with Alucia tomorrow afternoon. Mui recalls meeting Alucia being the silver-haired girl, so when Beryl asks her if she would like to join him and Alucia on the shopping trip, Mui tells him no. It doesn't take a genius to realize that Alucia wants this to be a date, and Mui doesn't want to get involved. The next day, Beryl meets with Alucia as planned, but this is the first time he has ever seen Alucia in her normal clothes, so he's a bit stunned by how nice she looks. Alucia thanks him for the compliment, and she's glad that Beryl noticed her outfit, but they really need to get going. As the two of them leave, Kuruni and Henblitz pop out from around the corner. Kuruni knows the store that Alucia is going to take Beryl to, so she's already mapped out a route so she and Henblitz can spy on them without getting caught. Henblitz calls her shameless for invading Beryl and Alucia's privacy like this, but she points out that he is just as guilty as she is because he came with her. Alucia leads him to one of her favorite clothing stores, but is a little uncomfortable because he doesn't fit in with the high-class aura of the store. As Alucia enters, the manager greets her by name and asks if there's anything he can do for her. Alucia tells him she just wants to look around, so the manager tells her she's free to do so, and if there's anything she likes, he'll be right here to assist. Beryl thinks the manager is really helpful, but he doesn't know where to even begin looking with the sheer number of clothes here. He also doesn't trust his fashion sense, so he decides to just leave the shopping to Alucia, but when she finally picks something out, Beryl realizes that her fashion sense is worse than his. The manager comes over and tells Alucia that she made an excellent choice, but Beryl knows he's just saying that because he wants to make a sale. If you were to wear that to the delegation, he'd never be able to live it down, so he politely says he'd like to keep looking before he makes any decisions. Beryl has now come to terms with the fact that if he leaves the shopping up to Alucia, then he's going to end up looking chopped, so he needs to take some initiative. He looks around the store and spots a suit in the back which looks like it would suit him. Alucia says she doesn't like it since it doesn't have any frills, but a plain suit is exactly what Beryl wants. Plus, this looks like it would be really comfortable. Alucia still doesn't agree with Beryl's choice, but it's his choice, so if he says he likes it, then that's that. She asks the manager to hold that suit for them because they'd like to go look at a few other stores before they make their decision. Personally, Beryl would be more than happy with the suit he just chose, but since Alucia is going out of her way to help him shop, he can't just ignore her opinion. The two of them leave the shop, and Alucia asks Beryl if he'd like to stop at a restaurant for lunch before they continue shopping. Meanwhile, Kuruni and Henblitz are still spying on them, and Kuruni is really invested in Alucia's date now. Alucia leads Beryl to her favorite restaurant in this part of town, and it's a little too fancy for Beryl's taste, but he's open to trying new things. Shortly thereafter, the food arrives and everything is going exactly as Alucia planned. Shopping and then having lunch at a fancy restaurant makes this an official date, so she's giddy with excitement. Meanwhile, Kuruni and Henblitz are sitting at a table nearby, and they are both surprised because they've never seen Alucia look so happy. Kuruni says it must be because she's on a date with Beryl, but Henblitz points out that if shopping and lunch is all it takes for it to be a date, then doesn't that mean he and Kuruni are on a date as well? Later that evening, Beryl and Alucia are walking back from their shopping trip and Beryl apologizes because even though Alucia took him to so many stores, he ended up just buying the suit he picked out from the first store. Alucia tells him it's not a problem as long as he likes it and besides, she had a lot of fun today. They both say goodbye to each other and as Beryl walks off, Alucia just stands there looking at him. Henblitz and Kuruni are still watching from behind a corner, but Henblitz has a lot of questions, so he steps out and decides to go talk to Alucia. First, he apologizes to Alucia and tells her he has pretty much been spying on her all day, but Alucia says she doesn't mind since she didn't do anything she would be embarrassed about. Now that that's out of the way, Henblitz says he has a question for her, and after Alucia agrees to answer, he asks her what she really thinks of Beryl. The next day, Kuruni comes up to Henblitz in the training hall and apologizes for yesterday because after he stepped out of their hiding place, she got scared and ditched him. Henblitz tells her it's fine and in case she's worried about it, he made sure not to tell Alucia that Kuruni was spying on her too. Although that just makes Kuruni feel even more guilty since she was the one who invited Henblitz in the first place. Just then, Alucia arrives and Henblitz greets her as usual, but Kuruni is still a bit nervous, so she slowly backs away and says she's going to go practice her sword swings. Yesterday, when Henblitz asked Alucia what she thinks of Beryl, she told him that she just wants to make Beryl happy, and Henblitz has been trying to figure out what she meant by that. Just then, Alucia interrupts his flashback and apologizes because she plans to take over the training hall for a while. Henblitz asks her why, so she explains that once Beryl arrives, she plans to challenge him to a match. Henblitz is surprised to hear this, but Alucia rationalizes her decision by claiming it will boost everyone's trust in Beryl if they see him go toe-to-toe against the Knight Commander. Blitz agrees since even if he loses, doing well against Alucia would be undeniable proof that Beryl is a qualified instructor, but Blitz asks her if that's really the only reason she wants to have a match against him. Alucia admits that if she wins, she is planning to confess one of her desires to Beryl, but that's all she's willing to say, so she excuses herself so she can get ready. Once Alucia is gone, Kuruni comes back up to Blitz and asks what he and Alucia were talking about. Blitz informs her that Alucia is planning to challenge Beryl to a match when he shows up, and if she wins, she says she's going to confess her desires to Beryl. Kuruni freaks out because that can only mean that Alucia is going to tell Beryl she loves him, and now that she thinks about it, it makes a lot of sense since she was having so much fun yesterday. Both of them think Alucia is beautiful and has a great personality, so many guys would be lucky to have her confess to them, but there is no telling how this will play out. A little while later, Beryl arrives, and as soon as he sets foot in the hall, Alucia walks up to him. Beryl is surprised to see her since she is usually busy with other tasks around this time of day, so he asks if she's here to get a little extra practice in. Alucia confirms this and tells Beryl that she'd like to have a match with him, but that really isn't what he was expecting to hear. Alucia says she wants to get some live combat training before the delegation arrives, and when she puts it like that, Beryl sees no reason to refuse, so he agrees to the match. They both get some practice swords and take their positions, but given the fact that Alucia is the knight captain, Beryl doesn't think he stands much of a chance here, but it's just to help Alucia practice, so he's fine with the odds stacked against him. Before the match begins, Alucia tells Beryl that people often call her lightning because of how quick her attacks are, so he had better be prepared, and as soon as the match begins, she demonstrates just how fast she is. Beryl was able to block her initial strike, which is pretty impressive since most people can barely react to her speed, but it still made him nervous because he has never had to fight someone with Alucia's speed before. Alucia follows up with a series of slashes, but Beryl is able to parry each one and stand his ground. He is starting to notice a few things here, like the fact that Alucia must have been training like crazy on top of her commander duties, and her usual tells before an attack aren't there anymore. Beryl can't keep parrying her at this rate, so he decides to go on the offensive, but Alucia is able to keep pace with him and starts pushing Beryl back. He is going to need to focus on every tiny movement Alucia makes if he's going to find an opening. As she lunges at him again, Beryl finally spots a flaw in Alucia's mean movement, so he is able to tell when she's about to attack and parry it, but with her speed, it still isn't easy to keep up with her. Plus, Alucia's observations are so keen that he can't land a single hit on her. Beryl is now certain that there's no way he can beat Alucia in a fair fight, but there's no rule saying he needs to play fair. After Alucia lunges at him again, she finds an opening on Beryl's side, so she repositions herself to take advantage of it. But before her strike could land, Beryl grabs her coattails and throws her to the ground. That's a point for Beryl, but Kuruni wonders if doing something like that is really okay. Blitz tells her there are no rules in a real fight, and besides, Beryl is the only person capable of successfully executing a move like that against Alucia. Alucia accepts her loss, and Beryl tells her that she fights a little too fair. In real combat, your opponent is going to take whatever advantage they can get, fair or otherwise, so you always need to be prepared to respond in kind. Just then, the clock chimes, so Beryl says he's going on a lunch break, and after he's gone, Blitz and Kuruni approach Alucia. Kuruni thought the match was amazing, but she wants to know if Alucia was really going to tell Beryl how she feels about him if she had won. Alucia acts confused and tells Kuruni she was just going to ask Beryl to go shopping with her again. Kuruni now feels silly for thinking Alucia was in love with Beryl, so she walks off in embarrassment. However, once Kuruni leaves, Blitz asks her the same question and she admits she did want to confess to Beryl. She wants Beryl to be happy more than anything, and it would be great if she could be the one to make him happy, but she's also fine with it being someone else if things don't work out for her. Later that night, Beryl is back home, and he is telling Mui all about his match with Alucia and how he could barely hold on. He admits that it felt great to have his student trying so hard in a fight against him, but from the sound of it, Mui thinks it was more than just a match to her. Mui is about to tell Beryl that it sounds like Alucia is in love with him, but he cuts her off mid-sentence. He knows what she was about to say, but he'd rather not hear it because Alucia is his student, and there's a huge age gap between them. The story continues. We see the next day, Mui gets home late from school orientation, so Beryl has dinner ready for her and already poured himself a nice cup of beer. Mui asks him if he really enjoys beer that much, and Beryl says there's no better way for him to unwind after a long day than to have some beer from his favorite mug. Mui points out that Beryl's mug has a chip in it, but he says it's fine since he can still drink out of it. More importantly, he noticed that Mui brought a bag home with her, so he asks her what's in it, and Mui opens it to show him what she got. The Institute gave her her new uniform and some basic magic textbooks, although the books are on loan so she needs to return them eventually and she has to be careful not to get them dirty. Beryl is proud of her because in a few days Mui will officially be a student of the Magic Institute. She already has her uniform and books ready, but then Beryl recalls the time he visited the Institute and realizes that the students there all had school bags. He asks Mui if the school mentioned anything about them providing a school bag for her, but since she didn't get one, she figures it must not be part of the starter package. She tells Beryl he doesn't need to worry about it since she can just use her sack, but Beryl refuses to accept that. He insists that Mui needs to have a proper bag before her first day of school, and although she doesn't really care what kind of bag she has to use, she appreciates Beryl's thoughtfulness. The next day, Serena gets called into the Guildmaster's office because he has a request for her. Serena reads the report, and Megan explains that a group of platinum rank adventurers found the monster and have cornered it in the forest near the capital, but the guild hasn't taken any decisive measures yet because they aren't sure they have the forces necessary to subdue it. The Guildmaster asks Serena if she would be willing to go out there and help, but Serena tells him her strength alone won't make much of a difference against a threat like this. Just then, there's a knock at the door and Serena is told that someone has come looking for her. Elsewhere in the city, Beryl has just found a good bag shop, so he walks in, but then he realizes he has no idea what kind of bag Mui would like. The owner can tell that Beryl is confused, so he comes and asks if he can help. Beryl tells him that he is looking for a school bag, and the owner quickly deduces that if Beryl is looking for a school bag at this time of year, then his child must be transferring to the Magical Institute. Beryl tells him he's right, so the owner points him toward a collection of bags that are popular among the Magic Institute students. This is exactly what Beryl was hoping to find, so he picks up one of the bags and says he'd like to buy it. However, the owner then tells him that the bag costs 95,000 dalk and Beryl is so shocked that he doesn't know what to say. The owner isn't trying to scam Beryl or anything. This bag is just made from imported Salura leather, so it is of really high quality. Even offers Beryl some cheaper options if the Salura bag is out of his price range. But all the cheaper bags look really cheap, which makes sense I guess. Beryl ends up leaving the store without buying any bags because he couldn't make a decision. All the good bags are really expensive, and while Beryl could afford it right now with how much he's getting paid by the Knight's Order, there's no guarantee that things will always be like this. He wants to save as much money as possible for Mui's future, so he can't go dipping into his savings for a bag. However, he still wants Mui to have a nice bag for school, so he needs to figure out a way to earn some extra money. While walking home, Beryl happens to run into Serena, and she looks like she's got something serious on her mind, so he asks her what's up. Serena explains that she was recently asked to take on a mission that is rather tricky, and she's not sure how she should approach it. She apologizes ahead of time for being selfish, but since Beryl is here she was hoping he could do her a favor. She asked Beryl if he would be willing to help her out on her mission, since it would make her feel a lot better, but Beryl doesn't think it's a good idea since he can't imagine himself being useful on a mission that Serena is worried about. However, as soon as Serena mentions the fact that Beryl will be paid for his help, he changes his mind and decides to go along after all. Later the next day, Beryl and Serena are on a carriage heading out to the mission site, and just to make sure he has all the details right, Beryl asks Serena to confirm that all they need to do is catch a particular horse alive. Serena tells him he is right and goes on to explain that the fine horse is meant to be presented to the royal family of Sphene as a gift upon their arrival for the delegation. Beryl asks if that means someone from the Liberion royal family hired her and Serena confirms it, which is why she couldn't just turn down the mission and ask Beryl for help. They soon arrive at the site and meet with the party that initially located the horse, so Serena asks them for a status update. The man tells her that they have established a firm perimeter, so they are certain that the horse is still within the forest, but it hasn't fallen into any of the traps they set, so they aren't sure where it is. Serena understands the situation, so she tells the adventurers to focus on maintaining the perimeter while she and Beryl go looking for the horse. They unpack their tools so they can head into the forest to begin their search, and along the way, Serena gives Beryl a description of the horse. According to the reports, it is pure white with a silver mane, which makes it extremely rare and precious. Beryl hunted a fair number of monsters back when he used to have to protect his field. This is the first time he has ever been asked to capture one alive, and it's definitely not going to be easy because this course was capable of evading a party of highly trained platinum adventurers. They eventually find some hoof prints in the mud near a watering hole, so they know the horse was here recently. But considering how smart it is, Beryl doesn't think it will return to a place where it knows its tracks are visible. That means it's going to show up at the watering hole on the other side of the forest the next time it gets thirsty, so the two of them plan to wait to ambush it there. They start heading to the second watering hole, and along the way, Serena asks Beryl if the living situation with him and Mui is going well. Beryl is caught off guard by the random question, but he answers that his relationship with Mui is a lot better than it used to be, or at least that's the impression he gets, but he can never really tell what Mui is thinking. Serena is surprised to hear that Beryl is having so much trouble since he has a lot of experience dealing with kids in his dojo, but training a kid to fight and being a father figure are two entirely different things. They eventually arrive at the watering hole, so Serena tells Beryl that once the horse shows up, she's going to get behind it, and Beryl is going to have to get in front to block its path. After that, she will shoot an arrow at it, and since horses are afraid of attacks from behind, it should get startled and run straight forward, where Beryl will have a net ready to capture it. That sounds like a good plan, but if the horse is meant to be given as a gift, Beryl worries that an arrow might leave a nasty scar on it. However, Serena already thought of that, which is why she got special arrows with cloth covering the tips, so there's no danger of injuring the horse. With that said, it's time for them to split up and wait for the horse, so they both get into position. Before long, the horse shows up to get some water, and now that Beryl has seen in person, he is amazed by how beautiful it looks. Serena begins crawling to position herself behind the horse, so Beryl does the same and quietly heads for the front of the horse. Once they are both in position, Serena shoots the horse's backside with an arrow, and as planned, it starts running straight for Beryl. However, before Beryl could capture it with a net, the horse jumps right over him and keeps running. Serena asks Beryl to keep chasing it, and Beryl must be a track star or something because he somehow manages to outrun his sprinting horse and once again get in front of it with the net. However, when he throws the net, the horse manages to dodge it, so Beryl is left with no other choice but to jump on its back and try to stop it manually. Unfortunately, he has never ridden a horse before, so he immediately falls off. The horse then proceeds to just stand there, almost as if to mock Beryl's failure, but when Serena tries to lasso it, it dodges the rope and runs away. Beryl and Serena continue chasing the horse until they manage to corner on a ridge. Serena tells Beryl she'll run ahead and startle the horse, so it will head towards him and he can catch it. However, while Serena succeeds in startling the horse does something completely unexpected and jumps onto a spire nearby. The horse seems really proud of itself for managing to evade them yet again, but a second later, the spire begins to crumble. Beryl couldn't just let the horse fall to its doom, so he jumps down along with it, and they both end up at the base of the cliff. The horse starts freaking out because it doesn't want to get caught, but Beryl tells it to calm down because he can't do anything to capture it while they're both stuck here. There's no way Beryl can climb up that cliff, and the horse definitely isn't making it up there, so they are going to have to get to the other side of the stream. Beryl briefly considers swimming, but one look at the water tells him that would be a terrible idea, so instead he takes out his sword and with one swing, he cuts down the tree next to him. Now he and the horse can walk across his safety, and the horse seems to understand that Beryl is helping it, so it goes along with him peacefully. While they are walking across the makeshift bridge, Beryl loses his footing and nearly falls into the stream, but the horse catches him in time. Beryl is grateful that the horse caught him, and the two of them seem to get along well now, so by the time Serena gets there, there's no longer a need to capture it. They both bring the horse back to town, and the guildmaster thanks Beryl profusely because requests like this one can determine the future of a guild. As promised, Beryl is given a handsome amount of money as his reward, and now that that's out of the way, they go their separate ways. With the reward money, Beryl was able to buy the bag for Mui, but when got home he couldn't find her, so he assumed she went out shopping. A few moments later, Mui returns and she is shocked to see that Beryl actually bought a bag for her. She had told him she didn't need one, but having a nice bag of her own is really cool. Mui thanks him for the gift and tells him she actually has a gift for him as well. She shows Beryl that she got him a new ceramic mug to replace the one that got chipped, and just to be clear, she tells him she didn't steal it. She got a job thanks to Serena and worked really hard to earn enough to buy it, and after hearing this, Beryl suddenly understands why Serena was talking about Mui so much today. She tells Beryl to try it out, and to his surprise, his beer tastes completely different compared to when he used his wooden mug. Mui heard somewhere that beer tastes a lot better when you drink it from a ceramic mug, and she knows how much Beryl enjoys his beer. She thought it would be nice if he could enjoy his beer even more, so she washed dishes for a few days to afford it, and Beryl is so touched by Mui's thoughtfulness that he is moved to tears. The next morning it is Mui's first day of school, and after getting ready, she and Beryl walk outside. Mui tells Beryl he didn't have to come with her, but it's her first day at school, so he just wanted to see her off. The school carriage soon pulls up, so Mui gets in and Beryl tells her to have a good day. Beryl then heads to work at the training hall, and Kurumi can tell that he seems happier than usual today, so she asks him if something good happened. Just then, Alucia shows up and she has something to ask Beryl. She tells him that the commander and vice commander of the Knight of Sphene have just arrived, so she and Henblitz will be meeting with them soon, and she was hoping Beryl would join them as well. Beryl doesn't really have a reason to join the meeting, but with everything that has happened with Sphene so far, he believes it would be best to keep a close eye on them, so he agrees to attend the meeting. But to his surprise, when he arrives at the meeting room, he discovers that the Sphene Knight captain is one of his former students, Rose. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.